Emily had always imagined her life following a perfect, predictable script growing up in New York City. She had dreamed of a lavish wedding, a charming fiancé, and a future filled with love and stability. Alex, her boyfriend of 3 years, had always seemed like the perfect match. He was handsome, ambitious, and attentive. Or at least that's what Emily thought. She had spent months planning their wedding, choosing the venue, the flowers, even the dress she believed would make her feel like a princess. But on the morning of their wedding, Emily's world shattered. Alex didn't arrive. The clock ticked past the hour, and her excitement turned to panic. Her phone buzzed with a single, cold text message, "I can't do this, I'm sorry, goodbye." The words were simple but devastating, and Emily felt her chest tighten as if a vice had gripped her heart. The man she had trusted, the man she thought loved her, had abandoned her on the most important day of her life. Tears blurred her vision as she ran out of the church, leaving behind guests who whispered in shock and confusion. Heartbroken and humiliated, Emily wandered through the busy streets of Manhattan. The city that had always felt alive and vibrant now seemed cold and indifferent. Neon lights reflected in puddles on the pavement, but their glow couldn't pierce the cloud of despair hovering over her. She didn't notice where she was walking, until she stumbled upon a small park, tucked between two towering skyscrapers. There, on a weathered wooden bench, sat a man who looked completely out of place. In the world of hurried commuters in business suits, he was dressed in worn, ragged clothes with a small paper cup in front of him. Yet his posture was relaxed, almost regal, and his eyes, warm and steady, met hers with a gentle curiosity. Emily almost ignored him, but something about the sincerity in his gaze drew her closer. She found herself sitting on the opposite end of the bench, fumbling with her hands, too lost in grief to speak. The man offered her a kind, understanding smile. "Rough day?" he asked softly. His voice was calm and unassuming, carrying a sincerity that surprised her. Emily nodded, unable to form words, and he waited patiently, giving her space. Minutes passed, and slowly Emily found herself talking, at first in fragments, then in full sentences. She spoke of Alex, of the betrayal, of the fear that her dreams had crumbled forever. The stranger listened without judgment, offering nods and occasional words of encouragement. By the time the sun began to set, painting the skyline in shades of pink and orange, Emily felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time since Alex's betrayal, she felt safe. She didn't know this man's story, and she didn't care. All that mattered was the warmth of his presence, the quiet comfort of someone who seemed to understand pain. Without pity, Emily didn't realize that this brief encounter on a Manhattan bench would mark the beginning of a journey she could never have anticipated, a journey that would change her life in ways she never imagined. The next morning, Emily woke with a strange sense of anticipation. She had thought the encounter in the park was fleeting, a small moment of comfort in an otherwise disastrous day. Yet when she returned to the same bench, the man was there again, sitting quietly as if he had been waiting just for her. He smiled when he saw her approach, a warm, inviting expression that made her chest feel lighter than it had in weeks. "Good morning," he said simply. "Mind if I walk with you?" Emily hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She didn't know why, but something about this man made her trust him. Perhaps it was his calm demeanor, or the way he seemed genuinely interested in her well-being. Without judgment, as they strolled through the streets of Manhattan, he asked her about her life, her dreams, her heartbreak, and she found herself speaking more freely than she had in months. I was supposed to marry someone today," Emily confessed, her voice breaking slightly. "And he just left me." He nodded, listening intently. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "People can be cruel sometimes. But that doesn't mean you're not worthy of love." "Not at all," Emily felt tears prick her eyes. But she managed a small smile. His words were simple, but they carried a weight that made her feel understood. As they continued walking, he shared stories of his own life, tales of small joys and minor misfortunes that made her laugh. Despite the lingering pain, he wasn't boastful or dramatic. He spoke with honesty, with a gentle humility that Emily hadn't encountered in a long time. They stopped at a small cafe, tucked between two towering apartment buildings. The man ordered 2 coffees, and they sat near a window watching the city bustle by. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt lighter, as if the heaviness of Alex's betrayal had lifted slightly. She laughed at his witty observations, and he chuckled at hers. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, a strange and unexpected connection forming between them. You make it easy to forget the bad things, Emily said quietly, stirring her coffee. I'm glad he replied, his gaze meeting hers. Everyone deserves a fresh start, especially after heartbreak. As the afternoon faded into evening, they walked toward the waterfront, the city skyline glowing in the fading sunlight. Emily felt her heart respond to the presence of this man, who had appeared out of nowhere, and offered her a kindness she hadn't realized she was craving. He didn't ask for anything, didn't expect anything, and yet he had given her something far more valuable than money or status, genuine attention and care when he gently held her hand. As they leaned against the railing, watching the sun sink behind the skyscrapers, Emily felt a spark she thought had died forever. It was exhilarating and terrifying all at once. She didn't know his story or what the future held, but she knew one thing with certainty. This man, a stranger dressed as a beggar, had awakened something in her heart that Alex had destroyed. And for the first time in weeks, Emily dared to hope over the next few weeks. Emily and Ethan spent more time together. Each day felt lighter than the last, as if the heavy shadow of Alex's betrayal had finally begun to lift. They explored the city's hidden corners, shared late-night walks along the Brooklyn Bridge, and laughed at small cafes tucked into quiet streets. Emily had never felt so comfortable with someone so understood, and yet so excited by the unknown. Ethan had a way of making the ordinary magical, watching street performers sharing homemade sandwiches on park benches, or simply talking about dreams and disappointments, until the sun disappeared. Ethan's warmth and kindness captivated Emily. He was intelligent, funny, and attentive, in a way that felt rare in the bustling chaos of Manhattan. He never pried into her past or judged her for her heartbreak. He simply listened, offered gentle advice, and made her laugh. Emily found herself opening up about her fears, her ambitions, and the ache of losing Alex. With him, the city didn't feel overwhelming. It felt like home one evening. Ethan approached her with an unusual invitation. There's an event tonight, he said, eyes glinting with a playful excitement. It's a charity gala. I think you'll enjoy it. Trust me, Emily raised an eyebrow. A gala? I don't exactly own a fancy dress, Ethan. He smiled, unbothered. You'll manage, come with me. Just trust me for tonight. Curiosity and a strange sense of trust won over caution. She followed him, wondering how a man who had walked the streets in rags could be connected to something so grand. When they arrived at the address, Emily was stunned. A massive, glittering skyscraper loomed above them, the entrance guarded by security and flashing cameras. The red carpet stretched before them, and reporters whispered excitedly as they passed. Emily's heart raced. Ethan. What is this? She asked, panic mixing with curiosity. He stopped, turning to her with a small teasing smile. It's time you learned the truth. As they entered the ballroom, a wave of realization hit Emily. The man she had laughed with in cafes, walked with through the streets, and held her hand on park benches was not what he appeared to be. Photographers called his name. Guests bowed or whispered in awe. Ethan was a billionaire philanthropist, one of the wealthiest and most influential men in New York. Every move, every detail of this event was connected to him. The beggar she had shared coffee with, the man who had listened to her heartbreak with genuine care, was a millionaire in disguise. Emily staggered back, eyes wide. I wanted to meet someone who cared about me for who I am. Not for my fortune, Ethan said gently, taking her hands. I needed to know that love could exist, without wealth or status interfering. Shocked disbelief and a strange sense of awe mingled in Emily's mind. All this time she had fallen for a man she thought was a stranger. And all this time he had been testing the world and finding her, someone with a heart bigger than any city skyline. As the music swelled in the grand ballroom, Emily realized her life had just changed completely, and in ways she never could have imagined. Emily stood in the grand ballroom, her heart racing, the glittering chandeliers above, reflected in the polished marble floors, and elegantly dressed guests whispered and stared, sensing the story unfolding before them. But all she could see was Ethan, the man who had walked with her through the streets of Manhattan, who had listened to her heartbreak, laughed with her, and held her hand when she thought no one could. The man who had been a beggar only yesterday was now a billionaire philanthropist, yet the kindness in his eyes remained the same. Ethan gently took her hand. Emily, I know this is a lot to process, he said softly, but nothing has changed between us except the truth about me. I'm still the same man who wants to be with you. Not because of your presence at this gala, not because of appearances, but because I care about you." Emily felt a rush of emotion, tears forming in her eyes. The betrayal she had endured with Alex seemed like a distant memory, almost surreal in comparison to the warmth and honesty Ethan offered. She laughed through the tears, shaking her head in disbelief. "I can't believe all this time I fell for you and you were like this." Ethan smiled, squeezing her hands. "I wanted to see if love could exist without pretense, without wealth or status, and it did with you." The music shifted, and a slow romantic tune began to play. Without hesitation, Ethan extended his hand. "Dance with me." Emily hesitated for only a moment before stepping into his arms. As they moved together across the polished floors, she felt a sense of peace and happiness she had never known. Every anxious heartbeat, every tear shed over Alex, every lonely evening wandering the city streets had led her to this moment. The man she had trusted, the man she had fallen for, had always been genuine, no matter the disguise throughout the night. Emily and Ethan laughed and danced, enjoying the celebration around them. Guests whispered about the unexpected romance, but Emily barely noticed. She was wrapped in the comfort of Ethan's presence, in the security of someone who valued her heart over anything else. They shared stories, exchanged soft glances, and even stepped onto the balcony to watch the city lights twinkle. Beneath them, New York had never looked so alive, so magical, so full of possibilities. At the end of the evening, Ethan turned to her, his expression earnest. "Emily, I don't want this to be just a fleeting night. I want a life with you, no pretense, no games, just us." Emily smiled, a mix of laughter and tears escaping her lips. "Then let's start that life," she whispered. And so, in the city where heartbreak had once shattered her dreams, Emily discovered a love stronger than any wealth, deeper than any betrayal, and brighter than any skyline. She had found someone who saw her for who she truly was, someone who loved her not for appearances, but for the kindness, courage, and heart she carried within her. That night, Manhattan sparkled not just with lights and luxury, but with the promise of a love that was genuine, unshakable, and everlasting. Emily knew without a doubt that she had finally found her forever.